Star Wars Squadrons is finally here. At long last, we get a space combat-focused title in the universe. It's been ages. Hell, the last game focused released on space combat was probably Jump to Lightspeed back in 2004, and that was a full MMO expansion. Before that, we had X-Wing Alliance back in '99, and then the old arcade games for console. So let's dive into it. Is it worth the $40 price tag? Which, take note, is less than past EA titles with a Star Wars logo slapped to it. And there's probably a reason for this, and that reason, I'd wager, content. At the end of the day, Squadrons is an 8 to 10 hour campaign, if you go for a single run, and 2 multiplayer modes and a practice mode as it stands. Oh, and keep in mind, so far, no cash shop or sign of any DLC shenanigans, just play to unlock mechanics. So is that enough to satisfy most? Or even the more hardcore Space Sim fans like myself who are huge Star Wars fans? And do I recommend it? I recommend it to some, with some heavy qualifiers. Let's get into it. If you don't have an interest in a linear campaign with a story to tell, or competitive multiplayer with no way of hosting your own community matches, then no, I don't recommend it. The game's not really gonna go far for you. And that's right, it's a competitive game that's made all of the sacrifices you'd expect to be balanced, such as limiting the number of ships available in the game, having similar fighter sets in different classes, and only 6 total maps for multiplayer, all I'd wager to keep multiplayer balanced and engaging and competitive, and then not have the ability for communities to run servers or even proper tournaments. I find it so odd that we as gamers are yearning for features that were standard in the box back in 1999. Gameplay in Squadrons is really solid. I had some wonderful moments on stream yesterday, but it does feel a bit, how to put it, slow, like I'm dogfighting underwater. This is most notable in the very first mission, where I found myself fighting around a large embedded asteroid outpost. Having structures and rock all around me gave me a very clear indication of my speed in this world, outside of just the blur effects and the cockpit shake, and it felt really slow. With full-powered engines and, being this is the first mission, no boost introduced at this point, it felt painfully slow, and I was in a TIE fighter. Later in the game, you'll be given access to some of the upgrades to customize your ride, but still, even with boosts and the upgrades that increased max speed, the fighters felt a little lethargic. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely fun. I really enjoy the drifting maneuver once I figured out it was just hit the boost button twice and turn your ship hard, and you'll slide around corners. But it takes a bit of getting used to before I could shake the feeling that I was actually in an A-Wing or a TIE fighter that's supposed to be suicidally maneuverable and fast from the word go. At least from the lore. Not to mention how slow the U-Wing and the Y-Wing felt when we jumped into those. But near the end of the game, I found myself flying the Y-Wing over any other craft. Switching power modes from weapons, shields, and engines, and using your gear to your advantage does make for some compelling gameplay in the campaign, but don't be surprised if your first jump into the cockpit feels a little, it's alright? It gets better later on. So let's talk about the campaign without spoilers. I already want to run it again on Ace, if that tells you anything. Some might slam it for being only 8 to 10 hours long, but for me, it was just the right length. Any more, and to be fair, it'd get a bit boring, as many of the missions, even at the length that it has, started to feel really similar. Defend the big ship while it does something important. Attack the other big ship before it does something important. Another wave of fighters is incoming, stop them. You start to get this repetitive cycle going. This is all broken up just enough by some really unique set pieces. And even if some of the missions felt a little stale, or it was easy to see where the story was going, I was still engaged with the characters of both Titan and Vanguard and couldn't wait to have my next little chat with them between missions. Taking over the role of the old HoloNet emails from X-Wing Alliance, you'd actually get to go and talk to them face to face. The hangar bays, though, will be endlessly annoying to me. In both sides of the story, as you switch every 3 or so missions, you switch from Rebel to Empire, you find yourself standing in one spot and being able to click on things to talk to people. This is kind of inspired by the old X-Wing titles, where you would click on the 2D image of the inside of the ship to go to those different sections. But this is completely 3D rendered. You can tell it's built for VR as you're moving your head around with the mouse. And yet, as I'm standing there, my go-to is to walk around, to look at the hangar, to walk around my ship that I can see is modeled and detailed. And you can't. They don't let you do it. You're stuck in that one spot. It's strange and a little bit of a bizarre choice, but that's how they've done it. I will say that the campaign is well written. It's a Star Wars story in an era that's unexplored in gaming largely. It's the time of the fledgling New Republic. It didn't overdo the use of known big-named characters and instead took its time to introduce us to the new heroes and villains of the story. And I do mean introduce us to the villains, as you are one of them, and it's pretty great. Some of the Imperial missions get a bit eye-rolly as you're ordered to commit your 15th war crime of the day, but the power-hungering, revenge-driven imps, some of them more broken than others, were interesting to explore, especially as they are now fighting on more even ground with the Rebel Alliance, I mean the New Republic. To see that strain on them and how they react over all the years of fighting, though the Imperial plot does take some bizarre hard turns, and I'll talk about that in the upcoming spoiler section that ends at this timestamp. So skip ahead if you don't want any spoilers. They're gone? Okay, let's talk story. So the big secret project that they're hyping up for like 4 missions in the campaign is, for anyone who watched the trailers or is familiar with Fantasy Flight Games tabletop stuff over the last few years, the Starhawk project. The Starhawk itself is being this massive warship built from recycled Imperial parts as a prototype. Its introduction is epic in the campaign and hands down my favorite mission of the entire thing, and sadly, it's kind of quickly disposed of later on after a couple of missions, but which is fine. You kind of get attached to it and you're sad to see it go, but what doesn't quite sit well for me is the Imperial Ending. It has this weird out of nowhere we won the day vibe to it after squeaking out a really minor victory, just before you rush forward into the Rebel section of the end of the campaign for the next 2 missions and undo all of it. It just comes off as strange, as if there was another ending that was written and they scrapped it so both sides could walk away victorious. It felt a little like they lacked the commitment to choose where they wanted the story to wrap up, or they've got a sequel for these characters planned. So that's it for Story Talk. Welcome back, everybody. Let's talk a little bit about the multiplayer. It exists. And there's 2 modes. There's fleet mode and there's 5v5, which is 5v5 with NPC capital ship targets and a different set of objectives. And if anybody tells you if it's amazing or it's not at this point in the game at release, they're talking out their ass. There's no way that anyone can give you an opinion on the multiplayer yet and tell you it's totally worth it, this is gonna be the next big competitive game, because there's no way to know how the community is going to react. And for me, I've played a little bit of the multiplayer now. I'm gonna play more all day today, and I'll form an opinion on it and probably revisit this in about a month. It is what it is, 5v5, the fleet stuff is pretty fun. Who is it for, though? I don't know. Competitive gamers with no ability to host matches, meaning that we'll never have an XP Gamers International Invitational, or what have you. So no competitiveness other than ladder mode and ranked seasons that'll be resetting every 8 weeks. Just play the round over and over again with your buddies. The combat is fun enough to be worth it, but I wish there was more that we could do with that combat. It's almost sad to have all of the tools in the toy box and have very little we get to do with them. And that's where I have trouble recommending the game, because I'm not sure who to recommend it to. Unless you're really into having a good story and a campaign and it's worth $40 for you, I'm kind of on the fence. And it's gonna be up to your personal preference whether or not what I've told you so far fits with what you're looking for. So is it worth it? Well, without some of the toys that we had back in the day, like mission editors, modding tools, more game modes, co-op support, community game hosting at the very least, or even custom modes that we can have a little fun with, and a very small ship roster. Remember, X-Wing Alliance had 27 flyable craft on release. That's a far cry from Squadrons. 8? I think it's 8. Yeah, I think they've got 8 fighters. I can't really recommend it, except for the experience of playing the campaign. The story is fun. Probably worth it if you just wait until it comes out on sale. You wouldn't miss much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this was helpful in figuring out whether or not Squadrons is right for you. Hopefully someday we get a little bit more of a deeper experience when it comes to content. I won't say that the combat isn't a deep, fun experience, because it's actually quite good. The customization is interesting, and I'll find out more about that as I play over the coming week, and I will revisit that later. But let me know in the comments below if you've been playing Squadrons, what you think about the game so far. Where do you sit on it, and who do you recommend it to? Not whether or not you would recommend it, but who? What kind of gamer do you recommend it to? All right, ladies and gents, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel for more gaming, sci-fi, and Star Wars-y goodness, including all that modding content that we've been covering for the last almost decade. I will see you all in the next one. Later, everybody.